David,
Sir.
most of the time when like you stay at home and I'm at the office working hard and you're like just messing around, it's because like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
your kids are sick, but it wasn't your kid. Or maybe I guess you could consider it a kid. What's going on? What's going on with your dog, dude?
Yeah, it's my favorite kid. And just for any of our listeners that are also viewers, it's the most pathetic thing in the world.
Oh,
A
look at
dog
that
with a
thing.
with a cone of shame on.
Cone of
But
shame.
here's the deal, dude. I uh I know you're familiar with Nate Bargatze, and I told my kids there's one of the bits that he does, and he's like, "Man, I'm just kind of busy right now, so I'm gonna put my dog down." And I was telling my kids, I'm like, hey guys, this is like way cheaper for me to not keep dealing with this stuff. And like, we could just put them down, maybe do a nice vacation with what we spent so far. So that's what I'm considering,
You're,
dude. And then I,
you're,
I also threatened Jake to put the cone on his head. I'm like, dude, keep messing around. You're getting, you're getting the cone put on your head. So yeah, that's
you
what's going
should
on, man.
you should just put the cone on your head.
I should right
Yeah,
now. Yeah.
you should.
So I would
No,
expect nothing less. Ryan, I apologize. You're probably going to get inundated with dumb comments and questions from Stu. That's kind of his role in this podcast is to ensure that there's an amount of levity in the lack of depth in his questions or even consideration in
you're
his comments.
you're gonna get a bunch of haters on this on the YouTubes of guys and gals that love dogs. You're gonna be like, oh,
Perfect.
you dog hater.
Bring
That's
it,
why
I
I'm
thought
man.
not
it was
commenting. That's why I'm not commenting because I'm trying to win as many friends as I can.
that's right.
No, no, you're smart. You guys are smart, but I just, the great Dave Chappelle, he was talking about Twitter, and he said people were trying to drag him on Twitter, and he was like, "Twitter's not a real place, so I don't care." He's like, "It's not real. It's not real, so I shouldn't." So I thought that was
Those dog
really
people though will show up at your door. So so you better be careful.
They will,
They
man.
will dox you and it will be
yeah,
over.
They
you're true.
will.
You're speaking truth. I live in Parker. For any of those that are concerned, I live off
No, you
of.
don't.
No, I do.
No, you
Yeah,
don't.
Parker. I can give the address here.
Nope,
Short. I'll put it in
you
the. I'll
don't.
put it in the show notes.
Lakewood, Colorado. Lakewood, Colorado. Ryan, are you a dog lover? I mean, let's just
I
go there.
am. We have a golden doodle that we've had for a couple of years. He's actually a great dog. He's just a spaz, and funny enough, he wears the cone of shame probably once a quarter because he just loses his mind and starts licking himself on his stomach or something, and then you take him to the vet and it's $500 in medication and then a cone that destroys your legs in the house. And
Walls,
he just, yeah. And then he
knocks
just
over
repeats the
lamps.
cycle all over again. And I'm like, dude, I'm literally going to kill you. But I'm also like you, David, where I really love dogs. But at the same time, there is a cap. Like there is a limit, and everyone's got to figure out what that is. I was talking to a buddy the other day, and he said that somebody he knew spent over $20,000 on their cat's surgery. And I want to
Oh,
be really careful here because I know how cat people are, but it will be a cold day in hell before I spend $2 on a cat's surgery. Never mind 20 grand. I mean, come
Dude,
on.
we went through something similar. I love dogs, and our we had a just a sweet, adorable, precious dog. And I actually went to the vet. He got cancer. He got sick, and I went to the vet, and I was like, "Look, this treatment you're talking about, what does it do?" And she's like, "Well, first off, these are not humans, so we don't treat this sickness for it's for comfort. It's not for healing." I was like, I didn't know that. I thought chemo was chemo. And she's like, no. She's like, we could do this and he could die in like 3 weeks. And I was like, oh. And she was telling me the cost. And I kind of made a joke. I was like, I could probably buy like 15 because I get mutts. And I was like, I could probably buy 15 mutts for what the price you just threw out there, like really nice mutts. And she's like, look, dude. And I was like, in all seriousness, though, I don't want to put my family in a weird spot because I'm spending this kind of money. And it was a very candid conversation. It's very real. But so I think you bring up a point, but I would never even have that conversation about a cat. I'm like, cat, you're just,
Yeah.
you're just, I'm sorry, cat. I'm sorry.
what
First
one
off, I
of
don't even
the
know how you ended up in my house, cat. But
Yeah,
for second,
seriously.
like, sorry.
One of the consequences that that I gave Dave one time was I can't even remember what it was for, but one of the consequences was he had to give money to a cat organization, a nonprofit organization, when he didn't do what he was supposed to do. I forget what that
Yeah.
was. I think it was looking at porn or something like that. But
And to be
anyways, before
clear, to be clear, it was we were with our men's group trying not to look at porn.
trying
So
not to look at
that's the point.
porn,
It
and if
wasn't
you
it wasn't
did,
wasn't it you know it wasn't
you had to give to the
a
cat
mandate to
organization.
look at
Yeah.
porn.
Yeah.
We're gonna start losing subscribers all like it's going down to zero. So let's shift and get back to Ryan. Um, hey, if you could give us a little bit of background about who you are and what you're doing, please.
Yeah, gosh. Okay, let me try and redeem myself here.
Yeah, there you go.
Uh,
Hey, to be clear, Ryan, you gained points in my book by not being a cat person. So
yeah, no, I
hey,
know.
you're on
Yeah,
a
I
good,
guess
you're on a good.
when we're thinking about the people we want to spend time with, I'm with the right people, so we're in a good
There you
spot
go.
here. Yeah, so most importantly to me, follower of Jesus, I was radically transformed back in August of 2006 as the result of a much longer story, but nearly sleeping with another woman. And so, by way of that event not happening, I ended up in church 4 days later, came to faith, and as a result of that, the Lord began to restore my marriage, which was in a challenging spot. I'm now married to my amazing wife for just over 24 years, which is just, again, a testament to the Lord's grace.
It's
I've got a
amazing.
23-year-old daughter, a 15, almost 16-year-old daughter, and just here a couple of weeks. So I'm going to have another driver in the house, which is always awesome. Um, and then on the professional side of things, I am a business strategist and a performance coach. So I work with organizations to help them build and develop sales playbooks to generate revenue, execute on the things that they have set forth for their organization around revenue. And then in my spare time, no, but my real passion is helping men. What I say is to ultimately achieve the greatness that God has called them for. I think that almost every single man, me included, is living in this gap in between who God originally birthed us as and who He has intended us to be. And somewhere in that gap, we're trying to figure out how to get to where God is calling us. And so I really try to help them do that. And so yeah, that's where I'm most passionate and spend a lot of time doing that too.
Yeah, I love it, Ryan. You and I met. I had met somebody on LinkedIn, and they connected me to a woman who lives out here. And then she's like, "Oh, you need to meet." Right? It was crazy. So I just want to give a plug for LinkedIn as well. If you intentionally use it for as a way to connect with individuals, it can be something that's very very fruitful, and that's in general, right? The intentionality behind the use of something like that, and where that um, also goes for me is you wrote a book, Wounds. It's there behind you. Stu and I both read it. Thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to read it. Man, there's some pretty incredible one, your vulnerability in opening up through through the stories that really helped you get to the place of developing the wound analysis framework were really touching. And some, I've never been a pastor, so the wounds from the church were not something that I directly related with from that perspective. But there was conversations I'm having with men because we also have a passion for men, and excuse me, and just um, the number of dudes who carry wounds, whether it's church, whether it's as you talked about that brought you to salvation, the wound of selfishness and sex is a specific chapter, the wounds of lies and loss, like all these different wounds. Man, I love how you use those things not only in a way um to seek to grow closer to Christ and who you are, what your identity is in Him, but you created this wound analysis framework, as I mentioned, right? You created a way to really dive into and analyze, analyze and assess these wounds, but also specifically from a three steps of acknowledging the hurt, which I think a lot of us we don't even make that step, right? Like I want to acknowledge that this thing that happened and maybe that I did, that there's pain involved in that. So acknowledging the hurt, realizing the effect of the wound in our lives, and then ultimately unlocking the greatness that that provides. And so, if you don't mind just talking a little bit about the book and your framework, I would love it because I found it to be very, very useful. And the framework itself was something a huge takeaway from the book where I was like, man, okay, I'm gonna start looking at some of my wounds a little bit differently to intentionally dive in to understand, okay, what can I one, how do I acknowledge, how do I heal, and then how do I grow?
Mm, yeah, no, I appreciate you guys taking the time to read it. It's always humbling when when somebody will do that. So let me give you a quick backstory because I think it's helpful. So I hired a publishing and a professional book coaching company to help me write a book. That book was originally intended to be written around my coaching philosophy, which is what most coaches and whatever people like that that's what they do. And so I hired this organization. I fly to Austin, Texas. I'm there for a week. That sets the foundation. I write 15,000 words, about 6.5 chapters of that book. And I'm 6 months into the process, something like that, and I just hit a wall. And it just felt so stupid to me. And so I reach out, I book a call with my coach, and she goes, "What's up?" And I said, "Well," I said, "this is stupid." I said, I can't do this anymore." And she said, "What do you mean? You're so far along." And I said, "This is just so pointless to me. I don't want a business card. I don't care to be an author like that. Like, that's not, there's no glory for me saying I wrote a book." I guess that was the point. And she says, "Well, what matters?" And I said, "Well," I said, I really don't know." And she said, "Well, what matters to you when somebody else is speaking with you?" I said, "The only thing that seems to matter when I talk to somebody is my story." I said, "But," I said, "it sounds very prideful, selfish, and again, quite ignorant, for me to think that if I'm going to write my story, that somebody's going to care to read it." And she says, "Well, that's what I want you to write." And so she helped me flush out a framework around writing, and we came up with this theme. Because at face value, I am the product of Orange County, California, white conservative America, and so most people look at me and they just kind of think they have me figured out. What they don't understand is there was a lot of hurt, that had been just bottled up inside me for a long period of time. And so I just decided, okay, well, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to go all in on this. And I really felt like after coming to faith that I couldn't be ashamed of the scars, the sin, the struggle, because that was just part of my story. And so I felt like if I was just going to go, I was going to go all in. So I started writing some of these stories. Some of them were a little bit easier to write in the sense that they were either fresh or they were I don't know, just a little bit more clean. So things like the Route 91 tragedy, which was really the catalyst to kind of kicking the book off. The story of my dad, that was a main thread that I'd pulled through for my whole life. But what I started to find was I could tell the story, but I was having a hard time making it make sense. And this gets to the framework. And so as I wrote out that first draft, and I just really just spilled, I think it was originally 7 chapters, not the 9. And as I spelled it out, the editor came back to me and she said, "Well, you need to have some kind of application." And I'm like, "Well, what the hell does that even mean?" Like, it's just my story. I don't know what to do with it. And she said, you need to have something that you can give to people to help them process how they're going to relate to this." And then she said, "Well, how have you related to this?" And I was like, "Oh, I never really thought of that." Because again, it was just a story being told. So that's when I felt like God really showed me Genesis 50. And we've all read the story of Joseph an umpteen number of times if we've been in church. But for whether you are familiar with church and that story or not, very briefly, Joseph in the Old Testament gets sold off into slavery by his brothers. Ultimately, they know he's going to probably be killed. They don't care. They're jealous of him. And so off he goes. They don't see him for a long period of time. During that time, Israel goes into famine. Joseph gets appointed to basically second to Pharaoh in Israel. And Joseph's brothers meet him again one day when they go to the government begging for food to get through the famine. and they see Joseph face to face, and they're like, "Oh my God, he's going to kill us! Like he's going to get revenge on us for everything that he did to that we did to him." And as they confront him, and he confronts them, he says to them, my abbreviated version, "What man meant for evil, God means for good." And it hit me. It was like, when my dad left, that was evil, but God meant it for good. When I nearly slept with another woman, I meant that for evil. God was going to use it for good. And so that's where the framework started to come into play. It was like, none of this was by accident. None of the things that I did, which most of the stories are things that I did or that were done to me, were by accident. They were intended by God to show me who he truly was and who he had made me to be. And so that was where the unlocking greatness piece came out. Was, gosh, there's something so much better for my life and so much better for our lives. But how do we do that? And so then I went, okay, well, as a guy, typically we are told from a very young age, when we fall down, when we get hurt, get up, dust yourself off, and get after it again. And there's a lot of wisdom there. Like, I don't have sons, but that's how I would raise boys. Like, be a man, shake it off. But at the same time, when we're conditioned to that, then we start to live into that reality when real wounds start to hit us. And so I just covered them up and covered them up. And it was just scar on top of scar on top of scar. And it was really like I was still bleeding out internally, even though externally it looked like I was okay. So then I had to go back again and start to, as it states in the framework, acknowledge the hurt. Um, because David, as you said, I think it's so true, and cut me off here anytime, but um, I think that we have a hard time. I don't think we have a hard time admitting that bad things were done to us or that we did bad things. I think what we have a hard time admitting as men, and typically as manly men, right? Masculine men trying to go out there and prove ourselves in good ways. I think we have a hard time that anything actually hurt us. Like this idea of weakness that is actually in good ways glorified in scripture is demonized in the real world. And we do it all the time. So that was the leaping off point, and then I went back and rewrote and rewrote and rewrote until I could really flush things out in such a way that it began to make sense in helping somebody else to start to walk that path as well.
Ryan, you hit on something just a second ago, and you touched on it in the book as well. You talked about masking the pain, and I think you're spot on, man. I think a lot of men specifically mask these wounds, mask the hurt throughout our entire life, in all kinds of different forms, right? Can you speak on that a little bit more? Like, did you see that in your own life? And then
Oh,
speaking with men now, like, how do you see that coming out, and how do we defeat that?
yeah. So I'm gonna speak to, I think, two that are probably most prevalent, that I see. So the one is overwork. When I was early in my marriage, I came from nothing. Like when my parents divorced, it was my mom working 2 to 3 jobs at a time just to provide for my brother and I. So we had nothing. We didn't get new school clothes. You had all that stuff. So when I started to achieve a level of success in my mid 20s, I think it was 24, 25 years old when I finally started to like make decent money. Man, that just got me. And I was married. And so we bought a house, driving nice cars. And so there was this element of wanting to continue to live into that lifestyle. And so I started working harder and harder and harder. And all the while, I knew I was struggling inside already. I could feel, my wife and I's relationship wasn't great. But I would just go work harder because I wanted to achieve more. The problem was, and this is where I think most men falter the most, is we say that we're doing that in the name of providing for our family. Now,
100%.
yeah, and the Bible's super clear. If you are a man and you are not providing for your family, like there's some bad things coming to you. And obviously there's circumstances, when certain men can't do that. And I totally get that. And God calls, certain people to certain things. But all in all, we are called to provide. And we should be trying to provide the best life humanly possible. Like, take your family on vacation, buy them nice things. There's nothing wrong with any of that. But what I was doing was I was saying that I was working 12, 14-hour days, that I was getting a promotion, that I was doing all those things for my family, when in reality, my family was just the secondary beneficiary of me having a title and being able to brag to everybody around me that I made more money. And the way that God would ultimately destroy that in me was he would eventually take it all from me. Every single bit of it. I mean, we lost our house. We lost every single toy that we had bought. And that was God showing me, like, dude, if you think for a second that the provision of yourself, like you actually being present with your family, was not more important than this money, then I'm going to show you just how important it is for you to show up for your family when you got nothing. And so that's one side that I think shows up very, very often. The other side of masking the pain, masking the hurt, I do think has to do with, like we were joking about it a little bit earlier, but has to do with pornography, but not quite in the way that I think a lot of people talk about it. So there's a lot of reasons why guys look at porn. I think one of the reasons that guys look at porn, though, is because they are ashamed of the fact that they don't have the sexual relationship with their spouse that they desire. And so instead of confronting the difficult conversation of, like, hey, babe, we're having sex once every 3 weeks, and that's hard for me. Or, hey, babe, like, I heard John Eldridge, Wild at Heart, talk about this not too long ago. It was a profound thing I heard him say, which was like, actually, guys appreciate and enjoy the intimacy of the sexual relationship, not just the get in there, bang it out, and leave. And so they're ashamed to speak about those things with their partner. And so instead of confronting the challenges the challenges that they're facing in their sexual relationship with their spouse, they're just going to go get off somewhere else because they can go hide and do that. And so that's masking that hurt, that's masking that pain, and that's preventing them from stepping into that. And I did that too. I wouldn't find this out till much later, but man, when I married my wife, we were best friends. And, sexually, like, we were on it all the time. Like, it was great. We weren't believers at the time, which that was the bad part, but I mean, we were just whatever. When we got married and shortly thereafter and started to face challenges, I remember that it felt like I was always like fighting to try and have sex with my wife. And it was far more infrequent. It was like I was bothering her. Well, all that did was made me more frustrated and angry with her. But really, it was because it made me feel like less than a man, because my wife didn't want me. And so what was my alternative? Well, two things. I either confront my wife, which I did not want to do because I knew deep down that the real answer was I wasn't fulfilling my wife in other areas. And so she just didn't feel that desire to want to have sex with me. Or I could do the easier one, which was I could just go to strip clubs and I could just go look at porn all the time. And so that's what I did. And that was temporarily fulfilling, but all that did was make me want it more and be more angry and more frustrated and create more problems in the relationship. So I know those are two very different things, but I think that those are two of the ones that I see show up really commonly. And even, I've been a believer for 16 years or 18 years. God radically removed the majority of that desire to look at porn. Like, it's not nothing, it's nothing like it was, but it still happens from time to time. But whether it's me or somebody else, like, those are the two areas that I feel like most men are sucked into and seem to justify the most.
Yeah, man, is super powerful because, as you were talking about the providing piece, one of our favorite questions to ask our dudes, or when we're just in conversation with men, is, this idea of providing is so prevalent. And they'll be like, hey, I'm doing this for my family. Like, I love that, dude. That's so great. We're called to provide for our family. Have you ever asked your family how they feel about you providing for them and what that means and what that looks like? And the answer may be, and if you've not intentionally worked through this stuff and intentionally, like, okay, how am I providing? because a lot of things that we dive into as well as a dad, like I'm also there to provide a model of manhood for my boys, a model of manhood for my daughter, and what she ideally, hopefully, will seek someday because she sees through me something that is that she would want for her life. There's a lot of different ways that we provide a good example, a path to Christ. I mean, there's so many things that we should provide, and just providing money is such a cheap. It cheapens it. Not that that's not important, but it
Mm-hmm.
cheapens it for all the ways that we're supposed to provide as men for our families. And so I love how you highlight that. And then the other side around porn, man, if men were just more honest about the not only the use, but it also gets passed down, right? Like there's these interesting facts coming out about these young men who they don't even know what a real relationship even looks like,
Mm-hmm.
because whether we're on social media or we're on our phones looking at porn, there are these bastardizations and images of what true intimacy looks like that we're just not
Mm-hmm.
experiencing. And so I really appreciate you highlighting that, because at the end of the day, the more that we normalize the conversation around the things that men are truly struggling with, then we can finally get to, the title of what you guys are getting after, men of greatness. Like how we're trying to get to a place of being great. And the only way to do that is acknowledging the hurt, right? Acknowledging what this really does to our lives. And then the second point, realizing the effect. And I'm curious, what does realizing the effect look like? Like how do you go from not only acknowledgement and understanding and finally getting to a place of like, okay, I want to dive into this, but what is realizing the effect? What does that really mean?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think that this goes back to when you were talking about the provision and porn, and you said around the provision, like, what is your intention here? What are the goals around that? If you talk to that, about your family, we there's intention behind everything we do. And I don't think that we truly understand that. Like, most guys don't look at porn necessarily just to sexually get off. And I think that that's actually one of the biggest problems with the narrative around porn in the church, is it's just the sexual sin, and it totally is. But there are so many different reasons why men turn to pornography. And if we don't understand our own reason for turning to pornography, we're never going to be able to address the root cause. So let me give you a real life example. Realizing the effect. So my dad leaves when I'm 6. At 6 years old, you just know your dad's gone. You don't really understand. I went right into fight mode, trying to support my mom. I think I was mowing the lawn by 8. My mom got breast cancer. I drove my mom around by the time I was 13 or 14 years old, because we just didn't have anybody else to help us. So I just went into this mode of protection, and I didn't understand what was going on inside of me. And what was going on inside of me, and I wouldn't realize this until many, many years later, was I was abandoned, even though my dad was around. And for the weekends that I saw my dad was extremely loving and supportive. I mean, we had our challenges, but um, there, I I guess I felt like if my dad left, then I wasn't good enough for anybody. Even though my mom was showing me all the love in the world, and my mom was an incredible mom, incredible woman, and I had friends. But as soon as I started to get girlfriends, I immediately went into this mode of, I got to prove to everybody that I can have a hot girl, and then I could sleep around with them. And then when it turned to, I befriended this guy. We got really close. He gambled a bunch. He made quite a bit more money than me, but I was like, you know what? I'm going to gamble too. And I got to show him that I could throw down just like he can. And I could throw a bunch of money up on the table, or I can bet big on a game. And you know what? When I lose, I'm just going to shake it off. All of those were negative effects and impacts of my dad leaving, because this emptiness, and I don't blame my dad for this at all. But the effects of my dad leaving, and that feeling of abandonment, caused me unknowingly to feel like I wasn't good enough. Like I wasn't worthy. If I wasn't worthy of my own father, how can I be worthy of anybody or anything? And so the only way to overcome that was to prove to everybody I was the team captain. I was the leader. I was the loudmouth. For a while, I got the best grades. I made the most money. I slept with the most chicks. I picked up the tab at restaurants. All of these things were ultimately the result of that thread that was just getting pulled and pulled and pulled because it went undiagnosed for so long. And so you think about that. Normally, when we diagnose an issue, sickness or whatever, we get to the root cause, we figure out how to heal it, and then we move, and then even then we move on. But what about the long-lasting effects that that has on us? Like even now, the majority of my bad tendencies, even the things that I will step into sinful behavior around, have to do with that. Still now to this day, it's like it will never end for me. But if I don't have awareness, I think that's kind of my point to this all. Like if I'm not aware, not just of the fact that it hurt me at 6, but how it has continued to negatively and positively too, but negatively impact me all along the way, I am, for lack of a better term, in deep shit.
Dude, your story is so similar to mine. I My dad left when I was 5. He moved to a different state and shared time. I grew up in a single family household with my mom and went to my dad's house for a week at Christmas and a month during the summer. And man, a lot of the same stuff that you're talking about is right there. Um, I'm curious, do you have a relationship with your dad now? Is he still alive? Do you talk to him? Do
Yeah,
you?
man. So, I mean, again, there's just God has been so good to me in so many ways. So I would go from 21 to almost 31, not speaking to him at all.
Hmm.
When all these things came to a head, and I realized, like, Dad, you did all these things to me, and so just no relationship. At almost 31, we reconnected, and now I just turned 47. My dad is one of my best friends. I have the most incredible relationship with him. He lives in another state. He lives in Arizona. I'm in California, so I don't get to see him as much as I can, but I will fly there for 2 days just to go hang out with him. And you know, one of the most heartbreaking things to me um, in this whole thing was, so I write this book. I talk about stuff like this all the time, and my dad is just always the topic of conversation. And um, as I was getting ready to publish the book, my dad pulled me aside and he said, "Hey," he said, "There's that book is a lot about me, huh?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "And it's probably not good." And I said, "Definitely. There's just not some things. You know, there's some things that are not good." And he started to cry, and he said, I'm so sorry for anything that I did to hurt you." And it wrecked me in the moment because I've screwed up so many times in my life with my wife, with my kids, with my dad. Like there were so many things that I did not do well. And I felt like there was just so much pressure being put on him in that moment to take on all this responsibility that wasn't his. Like, yeah, he made a bad decision. My mom and him like didn't get along, but he wasn't doing that to me. He could have considered it differently, but he wasn't doing that to me. And so I hugged him and I just said, "Dad," I said, "I love you so much." And I said, "I hate what happened." I said, "But at the same time, I am grateful because had that not happened, I don't think that I would have the level of relationship and respect that I do for you now." So again, I'm so grateful that I do have the time, that I don't have that regret, and that is something that I would encourage so many adult children. Like I have a tough relationship with my mom now at times, but man, I just think there's a couple of things in life that we can definitely have regret around. And I'm not in your situation. I don't know how other people, you know, with the experiences they've gone through, but there's just certain things that we just never get back. And if there's any way that we can find a way to re-engage, even just to a sliver of what it once was, I believe it is so worth it. And I believe that as we step out in faith to re-engage in those relationships, more often than not, God shows up in ways that we can't even imagine.
Yeah, man. I think that chapter about your dad was probably, I would say, the story about the Route 91, and I mean the intensity of especially two military dudes, like I felt the just I was actually talking to a buddy about your book, Navy SEAL, and we were talking through just the trauma of warfare, but the situation you were in with the Route 91, just that whole scenario. One of the first things that my buddy and we were like, dude, the problem is it makes it more traumatic because you can't even fire back. Like most of the situations that we found ourselves in Iraq, Afghanistan, whatever, at least we could fire back. We knew where the enemy was. It wasn't in Las Vegas, and we could fire back. And there was so much trauma. And there's that story is very, very powerful. And the loss that you experienced with Nicole is significant, and almost. I mean I was actually telling him the story about um, the bullet track on your wife's hat.
Oh,
I think if I remember correctly, right?
yeah.
And but the chapter about your dad, and it's titled "Wounded by Unforgiveness," and that chapter I would say was the most impactful to me because one, it was similar lived experience, but it was also, and that dude, I felt so much empathy for your dad. As a dad, I was like, dude, that must have like been super painful. But what it also did, we also have to acknowledge the responsibility, the weight of the responsibility that we have as men and dads. And it also is not fair to not acknowledge there's a lot of power and beauty in acknowledging, hey, if we make decisions from there are going to be consequences, and if we have children in the mix, there will be long-term consequences to every decision that we make, and we have to weigh all of that.
Yeah.
And while it is painful and there can be pain, there's also the beauty of the story that you learned not only how to forgive and what that did in your life, but also in your relationship with your dad, right?
Well, and
But I do
you want to
think
you
like
want to
it
know what's
forced
so
me to
absurd?
go
Let me
ahead.
let me let me share something about that. You want to know what is so absurd is so if you read the story in the book, you guys did, but I had this multiple year encounter with God in order progressively in order to forgive my dad, and I came to this place of realizing that I had asked God to forgive me, and yet I could not forgive my dad. And we will typically say, well, that's God and this is me and he's perfect and that's his, he's in the business of forgiveness. I'm not. And it's like, yeah, there's some truth to that. But at the same time, how could I ever, ever, ever ask for forgiveness without being willing to offer it as well? That was one thing. But the other thing that was even worse, and this is actually the encouragement that I want to give to anybody that is listening right now. And it's this: we are so hard headed that rarely do we learn from the things that we have done or the things that have been done to us. And the proof was on August, I think it was 9th, 2006, when I was flirting with that woman in the hotel bar in Chicago, Illinois, with the thought in the back of my mind that I was about ready to cheat on my wife. How in the hell did I ever put myself in a position to destroy my wife and to destroy my one child at the time, the second one not even yet to be born? How in the hell would I ever, ever, ever put myself in that position, knowing what I knew and the pain that it caused me when my dad left? I mean, it is like, I call myself an idiot a lot. Like, that is one of the most idiotic, ridiculous. Like, I want to call myself a man's man, a dude's dude. Like, that is the weakest of weak mindsets that could ever possibly exist, because I was not strong enough to put in the work because it was just easier for me to blame my dad for my problems and just accept the fact that my wife was now a part of the problem. I was abdicating every bit of the responsibility that God had given me before I even knew him, that God had given me to be a real man. And as we look out in society today, we are living in a world full of sissies. And it's not sissy necessarily because they won't jump in front of a bullet, though they should do that for their spouse too. But there are sissies because they would rather sit back and succumb to all of the garbage that this world is throwing at them than step up and be a real man and do something about that. And it's not easy. It's the hardest of hard. But these are the things that we need to do. And this is how we're seeing society fail so badly. And this is why, and I know, David, I've talked to you a lot about this. Like, this is why we are so passionate about seeing men transformed. I don't care about whether it builds a business for me. I don't care about whether I get recognized as, whatever, an influencer in the movement. What I care about is the fact that men or women and children everywhere are being failed around this country, around this world, because men aren't willing to do the real hard things. And that was my story.
Ryan, what's changed? Like why is it or or is it more prevalent now than what it was in the past, maybe for our dads? What has happened? I mean, you look at the stats now, one in four families are fatherless, right? There's
Mm-hmm.
just so many stats out there right now that just show that men are failing. Like what's happening? Why do you think that is?
Um, I think there's probably a lot of, a lot of reasons. I know there's a lot of reasons, and the data shows that there's a lot of different reasons. I would say one of the primary ones, probably. So Nancy Pearcey, she is a psychologist. She wrote a book called The Toxic War on Masculinity. Not the
Okay.
war on toxic masculinity, the toxic war on masculinity. Probably one of the best articulations of what's wrong with masculinity and manhood today. And that's surprising coming from a woman. Like I wasn't even going to read the book because of that. Anyway, so we've all heard the statistic that the divorce rate inside the church is the same rate as the divorce rate outside of the church. When I was a pastor, I used to preach that stat all the time. And she actually dives deeper into that and proves the fact that that's not actually the case. What she says is that there are a lot of church goers inside the church that are not there intentionally, that are not paying attention, the men specifically. She says the men that are truly invested into the local church and are invested into their own faith and bringing their family along in that faith, I think the divorce rate, I could be wrong, but it was like 10%. It was so minor. So to answer your question, I think that it has gotten way too easy to be a church going, quote unquote, Christian in society today. I think that a lot of that has to do with church leadership. We have seen a over sissification, and I'm trying to use that word instead of the P word, uh, um, in the church. We're watching churches, just fall to societal pressure. We're seeing men's ministries that have turned into just whatever arts and crafts fairs themselves, I think. And so I just think that there's been a lot of failure on the church side, leadership to invest deeply into men. And then I think that from the men's side of things, it's just super easy to go to church and say, I checked that box, I'm a Christian, but not do anything real with it. And so I would say that that's probably one of the largest factors because 50 years ago, society was just a lot more moral. And you can say, well, that's not Christian. And I would agree with that, only adding to the fact that that morality was significantly based, and Nancy talks a lot about this in her book, was significantly based on Christian practice and principle. And so the church was influencing culture and society 50 years ago, maybe a little bit more than that now, in far greater ways. So even though my dad was just kind of I don't know, American Catholic, um, there was enough influencing him for a period of time that just made him a little bit better than most of the men today.
I think I read a stat. I follow John Mark Comer a lot. He's a
Oh,
pastor and author, and just really love
yeah.
everything he puts out. But I think he said something like 74% of Christians go to church, but only 14% of them actually practice the ways of Jesus, something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I
It's
just got done reading the practicing the
practicing the
way,
way.
or
Yeah,
listening to it. And yeah, wild.
fantastic, fantastic book. Goody, I know you got something smart to say.
No, man, I do. I was taking that note down to read that book because I love the idea of, we're looking at symptoms and we're drawing wrong conclusions, right? Oh, half the church, half the society, therefore they're the same. And I would say half the church is probably the same as society, to your point, because
Yep.
there's nothing there. The level of faith, the level of exercising, and the amount of discipline required to truly seek something that you say is the most important thing in your life, and then you don't invest any time. Stu and I were joking before we hit record. We're like, man, if you're saying Jesus is the most important thing in your life, and you spend no time in the Word to get to know Him, or in prayer, or with other fellow believers to challenge you in your assumptions, then it's worthwhile to say, is it really that important? Just like
Mm.
supporting my family is super important. Cool. Ask them the question. Uh, do they think that your efforts and work are supporting them and are in love for them? And dude, I just love the digging a little bit deeper because it's such an easy cop out. And I think to your point, divorce is so easy too. Right? It's just so easy. It's probably easier to get divorced than it is to get married at this point.
Yeah.
And it's probably a lot more. There's a lot more money being made in that profession as well. Like, hey, let's break this thing down. But I think just the idea of, as men, I was talking to my boys the other day. I was like, hey, like, stop being a sissy about this thing. But it wasn't to belittle or to say man up and these false
Hmm.
ideas of manhood. It was an idea behind, if you want this thing that you said you want, then be willing to work for it. And if you're not, then
Yeah.
that's just a sissy thing to want, right?
Yep.
And so I think that in the context of the book, and I want to touch quickly on the Men of Greatness as well. Like, tell us about what that is, and how you're personally endeavoring to desissify more men.
I'm gonna coin that now that I've said it so many
You
times.
should, man. You should.
No, I can't. I can't because I can too easily go to just the negative. So I, when I was a pastor, I had more of a passion for discipling men because of, again, the brokenness in my own life. Even stepping down in 2020, I continue to feel that draw into serving men, supporting men, because I'm so public about my brokenness, and I try to speak about my present day brokenness, not just the past. The past is easy to talk about; the present's hard. And so I was finding myself regularly being engaged with other men that were struggling. I mean, I had just the most random encounters, not random, but with people that would come to me and tell me their deepest, darkest secret because they didn't know where else to turn, even though we didn't have the greatest relationship. So I made an initial crack at creating a community for men in COVID in 2020, and epically failed. And it was just, the messaging was too, I was just caught up in a lot of the messaging of the present day gurus of whatever, marketing to men, and it epically failed. I lost a lot of money and a lot of pride. And so I kind of hit reset. I went back into corporate, just investing more into the corporate side of my business and coaching and leaders. And anyway, so then I wrote the book, and I thought, this is my opportunity to do this again, but a little bit differently. And I want to punchline right now, I'm still doing this very unsuccessfully. I felt like I'd be a lot farther along in engaging a community of men in my local area than I am. It's probably partially my fault, partially their fault, but we'll see. Anyway, so as I started in the journey this time around, I thought, okay, it has to be based upon my own journey. Not because my journey is the typical journey, but because as I share my journey, there's a lot of attachment points for other guys along the way: relationships, money, whatever, all these things, addiction. So I started to build like the idea of community around men. Um, I tried to go the online route and decided that that wasn't for me. I feel like there are too many opportunities for men to partially invest or hide behind a screen because we're not regularly engaging in face-to-face interaction. And there are successful groups out there doing it, so I don't want to bash that at all. That just wasn't for me. So anyway, fast forward till actually just September of this year, I finally committed to in-person relationship building. And so what we do is I've created this greatness framework. Once a month, we're going through one of the letters of greatness. Growth, resilience, excellence were the first three that we've done. Um, and so every single one of those is guided by biblical principle, but then we're really just diving into the reality of what does it mean to be resilient and how does that show up in these five key areas of our lives, which, everybody calls them something a little bit different, but faith, relationships, our health, our money, and our business. And so I started to do that, and I've seen some success in the sense that I've got, I don't know, 12 or 15 guys that are showing up here once a month in the evening time for 3 hours. We workshop through a topic. We seem to be endeavoring pretty well. But the one unlock just came about 3 weeks ago. And this is actually back, David, to your point from a little bit ago. I think one of the reasons why men continue to gravitate towards the professional and maybe even the health is because there's a scorecard. And we're very driven by metrics. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that the struggle has been with our faith, with our relationships, probably those two primarily. There's no scorecard. And so it's really hard to know whether we're doing well or not. And so I was at a mastermind, I'm riding down the elevator with this guy, and he says that he's doing something similar to me. He's out in Dallas. He's got 280 members, almost all in Dallas. And I'm like, damn, dude, you're killing it. And I go, yeah, I just did this workbook. He goes, I just did a workbook. And he goes, I happen to have one of mine here. And he flips his open, and his workbook had the one thing mine didn't. And it was a scorecard in each of these five areas. And so that's the thing that I've been most excited about is helping men to create a scorecard around their faith and their family specifically. Now, it's still there's some variables involved in there, but that's what I've been most excited about is we call them the 5 pillars of greatness. Again, it's those 5 areas and really helping men to ultimately become great in each of those 5 areas. And so trying to create some customization around how we help them get there. But it's been exciting, but then again, frustrating at the same time because, it's never working as fast as I want it
Let me just acknowledge you and validate you and just say, us too.
to. Well,
Us too.
I want to say this. I've actually been waiting to say this out loud for a while. Um, I don't know if I've felt as much like a failure as I do right now. And it's so fascinating to me because I'm killing it with my wife and kids. And they would say that, not me. I just had all like an extensive panel, like a metabolic panel done. My health, I just turned 47 3 days ago. My health is better than it's probably ever been in my life. But I feel like I keep coming up against a wall, particularly in this area that I know God is clearly calling me to with this Men of Greatness idea. And it's the starts and stops. And, 12 guys show up, then 9 guys the next month, then 4 more guys commit, and only 2 of those. And so I feel like I'm at this place where I'm like, Lord, if this is what you want, you better start doing something, right? And demanding God is not always the best idea. Anyway, so I say that because people can listen to somebody like me that they don't know me, they know you guys, they don't know me. And I'm talking all this stuff around how to be a man and how to be successful and all the ways I've overcome. And it just sounds so, I don't know, intangible, unrealistic. Like I'm just so fake. And I just want people to know, I want guys to know specifically that, like, for whatever it's worth, I I don't have any of this figured out. And have a long way to go. And I think that every single time I think I get a little bit closer, I realize of how much less I know about God and how much less I know about what he's calling me into. And so I really wanted to say that out loud because I just want the one guy right now that feels like they want something so much bigger and they don't know how to get there. that, dude, you are not alone. And you are, if you're trying, like really trying, and you've got accountability around you that says you're trying and you're not getting to where you want to be or where you feel God is calling you to be, it's okay to say, I don't love it. I'm frustrated with it. I feel like a failure, but I know that there's something better coming and I just need to stick with it. So I wanted to say that so bad before we left because,
Dude, that's encouraging.
anyway, I just think it's important.
It 100%, man. I appreciate that so much. That's powerful to myself personally, and I think to David as well. Like, because we've had a lot of those moments in
But
the
yeah, I
past couple of
mean,
years.
you saying you feel like a failure makes me feel a lot better. So thank you. Right? I'm just kidding. No, I just opened it, but I was looking at my journal this morning, and you don't know me that well, Ryan, and this may be a little more surprising to Stu, but I'm a pretty positive dude. Like I'm very optimistic. Sometimes just really leaning towards that. And in my journal this morning, I mean, I wrote the words, I woke up melancholy today. Like I woke up feeling like I literally woke up sad. And I'm like, oh, this is weird. And I went and did my workout and I just don't feel like me today. And it's not, I mean, I got my quiet time in the morning. I got my workout in at, my bright and early workout. I got all the things that typically make my morning and day start out well. And it's something, and maybe it was in preparation for, the conversation we're having and just being real and honest, because there's this side that's just like, God, I believe you called me to these things. And I know you're good. What's up? Like here I am. But also in that is the acknowledgement of God. I imagine when he explains, when I see him face to face and be like, hey, I was growing you in a way that were not that you weren't prepared for where you ended up.
Mm,
I was you are not able to see my timing. You're not even able to see the impact
mm,
that I am using you. And there are maybe men whose lives now are continuing because of the efforts that you make, Ryan, right? And you just don't know it.
yeah.
And you're not going to know it. And there's dudes, and maybe there's women as well. I'd encourage the Wounds book, but there are people that are relating with you in ways that you don't even know.
Yeah.
And there are things that I think when we get to heaven, we're just going to be like, oh my gosh, like,
Yeah.
wow. Oh my gosh. And so I just want to encourage you in that too, that I think there are by design in our walk with God, things that happen. But I want to encourage you in that the book, like I literally, when I did that post this week, like I was in my car waiting to go to a lunch with a complete stranger who also super passionate about men. And I'm like, dude, I gotta like clean up a little bit. I gotta fix my blush and do my eyeliner's running. Like I'm crying in my car because I'm having this moment
Mm,
that I would not have had if not for the words you put on the page.
mm,
And so there are things that you're just not going to see as well. And so I just want to encourage you in that because I was profoundly impacted by your book. Um, Not because I think you're cool and it's about you, but because I'm like, man, how do I reflect on this as a father? How do I reflect on this, the wounds I have that I carry with my dad, and how do you move forward in this, and how do you unlock greatness? And so, dude, I want to encourage you in that. I know it's tough and there's a slog, but you are making an impact and it's very real, and more importantly, it's eternal.
yeah.
And that's going to be the real measuring. So talk about a scorecard. When we face God in heaven, that scorecard, that's where it's going to be. That's where it's going to really matter.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. And, I think that probably the biggest wrestle in my life, in my adult life, has been being okay with the tension between desiring so much more and being content with where God has me right now. And I've been trying to live by this idea that what if where you are right now is exactly where God wants you to be, which the answer is theologically 100% yes. And so that's this tension that I have to live in every single day. It's like I don't ever want to settle. And yet I fully trust in the fact that whether I see it or not, that me just being obedient to God is more than I could have ever imagined, not knowing him at all. So no, I do. I really encourage that. And I just, those are the reminders that shut up, dummy, and just keep doing your thing, because that's all we can do. That's all we can do.
That's good, man. It's a good way to end. Ryan, how do we get more people hands on this book and learn more about everything that you're doing, Men of Greatness, all your coaching, all your business stuff going on? What do we put in the show notes?
Yeah, you can just go to coach.ryanjamesmiller.com, and you can find everything, all the social media stuff and website. And we do have a digital download of our Men of Greatness workbook. It's a pretty extensive, I don't know, 32 or 34 pages. It works through that whole greatness framework that we give away for free, no obligation, no nothing. So they can download that there too.
Love it, man. Guys and gals, reach out to Ryan. Read this book, Wounds. It's powerful. It's impactful. It's made a huge impact on both David and I. Ryan, thanks for your time, man. It's been good.
Thank you, guys.
God bless you.